Welcome, everybody, to the CSM Mastermind. I'm Andrew Marks, co-founder of Success Hacker and our success coaching training program. We're back for our monthly live webcast today, talking about CSMs driving revenue growth. This learning opportunity is brought to you by Success Coaching, the world leader in customer success development training. With now more than 31,000 students from nearly 100 countries, our skills development platform is making an impact across the globe. And as you can see, we've got a global audience. Whether you prefer self-paced learning, an instructor-led bootcamp, an interactive workshop, or a personalized weekly coaching program, our wide range of customer-focused programs and formats are tailored to meet the unique needs and learning preferences of everyone. If you're eager to level up your customer-facing skills, don't miss out on these amazing learning opportunities that can truly transform your professional journey. Ashley, have you dropped it? Ashley, she has. Awesome. Ashley has dropped a link to our program page and any coupons that we're offering right now in chat. I also believe there's a survey. If you could take a few minutes before we get done here and fill out this survey, we're doing this confidential survey on to help companies and leaders understand what makes a job you love and your current challenges. You can find out more about all of our programs and workshops at successcoaching.co. This CSM Mastermind series is a live and unscripted discussion where we dig into a single topic relevant to customer success. No matter where you work, what your role is, or who your customers are, we've got you covered. A few housekeeping items before we get started. This webinar is recorded, and we will be posting a replay and transcript on our website early next week. So just as a reminder, we go until a quarter past the hour. So if you have to leave at the top of the hour, you can watch the rest of the recording and the transcript on our website early next week. We encourage active participation. One of the reasons we extended it by 15 minutes is we wanted to have enough time to answer as many questions as possible. So please feel free to ask your questions using that Q&A button located at the bottom of your Zoom interface. Questions with higher upvotes will receive priority during the Q&A session. So if you see a question that's similar to what you want, you're much better off getting it upvoted. And then, of course, for our LinkedIn Live audience, you can also post your questions directly, and they will be relayed to us. Thank you, Santana, for sitting in and helping us with that. To maintain a smooth discussion, please use the chat window exclusively for commentary while directing your questions to the Q&A window. And Ashley will remind you if she sees questions popping up in the chat. She's a pro at this. As a matter of fact, if it weren't for Ashley, this thing would be a complete mess. There's a bunch of thought leadership out there, along with a lot of theories on how to deliver customer success. But in this series, we're going to focus on practical real-world advice, best practices, techniques, and shared experiences from those who are actually doing customer success day in and day out. And now to make that happen, we've invited three amazing panelists to join me for a roundtable. These are all veterans, by the way, of our webinar series. So these are folks who are really darn good at what they do. And so we're going to ask them to spill the beans on their experiences and perspectives. So without further ado, I want our panelists to introduce themselves to you all, share a little bit about who they are and what they do. And let's get started as usual in alphabetical order with Dan.
Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate that. My name is Dan Ennis, and I'm the Senior Manager of Scale Customer Success at Monday.com. I've been with Monday for just shy of 4 years now, joined to help build out their scale customer success motion. I've got over a decade of experience in customer success and over 5 years of people leadership. I'm really passionate about all aspects of CS as we're continuing to evolve, and especially what it looks like to bring in leadership principles and scaling in digital to CS. So I'm really excited to be here on this topic today, Andrew.
Awesome. And thank you, Dan, once again for agreeing to participate in I'm launching a Sacramento area CS meetup. We're going to be meeting for the first time at the end of May. So if anybody out there is in the Sacramento area, I'm talking to you, Chico, and anybody else, please reach out to me and I'll get you on the list. But we're going to, our first kind of an inaugural event is going to be talking about scale and kind of balancing between human touch versus automated. And Dan has graciously agreed to come up from the East Bay to be part of our event, in addition to a couple other folks in the area that have that experience. So Dan, I appreciate you helping out with that.
Absolutely. Always happy for an excuse to drive up.
Yeah, awesome. And we'll get you. We'll ply you with some beer and stuff like that. Erika, you're up.
Thanks, Mark. Hi, my name is Erika Villarreal. I am currently the strategic CSM at Eptura, a global WorkTech company that offers solutions for workplace, people, and assets. I've been here for 3 years already. Prior to that, I worked at a fintech company for 10 years, and I have experience leading sales, operations, and customer success teams in the past. I am deeply passionate about owning revenue. It's one of my favorite topics to talk about. Over the last 3 years, I have consistently exceeded revenue targets, and I guess that's the reason I am here. So I'm very excited to be discussing this amazing topic on my birthday. My birthday is today.
Oh, really? We didn't know that. Well, happy birthday. That's awesome.
Thank you. And sharing my insights on how to maximize revenue. So
awesome. Thank you. And once again, thank you for spending time with us on your birthday. Happy birthday.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you,
Erika. And one more question for you. So you live in Dallas?
I live in Dallas, Texas. Yes.
Are you a Cowboys fan?
I am a Cowboys fan. Yes.
Okay.
Are you going to send something from Cowboys?
No, I'm not. Let's not talk about football then. Because see, I'm a Niners fan. And so we have a bit of a, although we've had Dallas's number for the last few years.
Yeah.
Awesome, Erika. Thank you. And last but certainly not least, not only a veteran for this program, but also somebody who has graciously given up their time for my coaching cohorts, Marta.
Hi, everyone. It is not my birthday, so I will take some time and wish you a happy birthday, Erika.
Thank you.
But I am the global head of customer success at Gatekeeper. We are a vendor and contract lifecycle management platform. I've been at Gatekeeper for nearly 2 years. Prior to that, I was at eCompliance/Alchemist/now Eco Online for about 4 years. And that's when I really entered the world of leadership when it comes to customer success. During my time there, I was responsible for taking over the expansion for customers, and we grew 70% year over year between 2020 and 2021. So I have a lot of experience with this and a lot of passion when it comes to CS owning revenue. And I'm very excited for today's discussion.
Awesome. Thanks, Marta. So, when Marta spent time with my coaching cohort, she does this amazing talk about segmentation. Is segmentation part of that success?
It's very important because you can't treat every single customer every single way.
That's right. Awesome. All right. Well, we'll get to that. Once again, we all appreciate your time today. So now let's get to the topic at hand. Today, we're tackling a controversial topic. Should customer success managers focus on driving revenue growth? So I want to do a quick poll. I'm going to launch this poll. So if you would all jump in on, responding to this poll, what kind of revenue are you responsible for, if any? Now, some argue that CS should remain purely relationship focused. But in reality, any team that wants to be taken seriously in a company must own a number. As organizations recognize the untapped potential of their CS teams, they're empowering CSMs to engage in upselling, cross-selling, and customer advocacy actively. In our time today, we're going to challenge the notion that CS doesn't need to be revenue focused and explore how CSMs can become key players in driving financial performance. So let's kick off. Actually, let me take a look at the poll real quick. Wow, we got an 83 of 120 participants. 69% I'm responsible for retention and upsell revenue.
69.
That's great. I did not realize.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Love it.
21% I'm responsible for retention revenue. 7% I'm responsible for upsell revenue. 4% I am not responsible for any revenue. Okay. All right. So maybe this is less of a convincing them that they are and more of a here's how to do it right type of conversation. But let's kick off with a bold question. Is it time for CS to shed its soft skills reputation and embrace a more hard-hitting revenue-driven approach?
I'll jump in on this one and just start with really the short answer is yes. This is absolutely something that CS teams will need to embrace going forward. The soft skills that CSM teams have really become known for in the past are absolutely vital for building customer relationships, but those soft metrics don't really demonstrate added value to your organization in a way that's measurable and can therefore remove CS team's strategic seat at the table. And sometimes when you hear a CSM team talk just about those soft skills that they need to be known for, you would almost get the impression that they work only for their customer and not for their employer. And so kind of maintaining that dual responsibility there. And so being able to demonstrate that value is what will give you that seat at the table with your own employer and with your company, because your C-suite teams don't care about a nice feeling around good customer relationships in a vacuum, because you could just be perceived as a cost center and as really high cost tier 2 support. Companies are scrutinizing their budgets. They need to embrace profitable, durable growth, and CS teams are positioned to be one of the primary levers for this. And if they don't embrace that, they can be on the chopping block because they're just seen as a really high cost center, but they're also positioned to explode their strategic impact.
Yeah, and I agree with, and by the way, of course, I say these things tongue in cheek. We actually I try and throw out controversial kind of statements. I 100% agree with you, though, that the soft skills is a key part of it. We're not suggesting that you throw it all out, right? It needs to be it needs to be and it's an important complement to that selling motion. But Erika, Marta, either of you have anything to add to what Dan had to say?
Yes, of course. Sorry, Marta, I'm going to jump in. So I completely agree with Dan, and I think the shift that we have seen in the last 2 years with all of the layoffs that are happening and all of the teams that are being literally banished out of thin air, I think this is putting CS in a pretty good position, owning revenue, owning a number, and demonstrating the value in money that you're bringing to the table is what will help CS teams keep their jobs and even grow their teams. If you can demonstrate, how much money you're bringing, you can also secure more resources for your team moving forward. So I just couldn't be a better time for us to start discussing this revenue situation. So
I fully agree with that. And there's nothing in what either Erika or Dan have said that I would challenge, but I would add on to the conversation around soft skills versus a more revenue-driven approach, that I think what makes customer success managers unique in being the right team member to own the revenue is because of their soft skills. We are in a very unique position to truly understand what the business objectives are of the customer and then work with them to deliver on those business objectives. And so in order to drive expansion, drive retention, none of that can happen if the customer hasn't met their objectives. We haven't had that continuous value delivery. And so being a CSM who is responsible both for understanding that and using the soft skills to get there, and then working towards executing it, we can use that, and I'll borrow Kat in the chat's term, we can use that power skill to actually drive the retention and the expansion in a way that's a lot more effective than someone who might more transactionally come into the account come renewal time, or when a customer has mentioned potentially wanting to upsell.
Well, and I mean, think about this, right? You have salespeople whose role is to go out and find greenfield opportunities. That's our primary role, right? I need to go find a bunch of new prospects, and I need to take these prospects from a point of prospecting to a point of sale, right? And in doing that, I need to convince them based on evidence that is likely outside of their organization. They're going to base it on evidence from other people that this is a good thing to do. This is why sales can be very challenging. I've got to convince somebody that even though I have evidence from other companies, I don't necessarily have evidence that your company has gotten value out of this or will get value out of it. Now, flip that to the customer success side. If you've done all of the things, and we were talking about this before we launched, right? About the renewals and the expansion stuff. If you've done all of the things that need to get done in order to help the customer achieve value, you actually are an incredibly incredible position because you can walk in and say, listen, I'm proposing that this enhancement, this expansion is going to get you more value, right? And I'm basing that off of evidence that we've already gotten you value, right? It's not evidence from another company, it's you, right? I've helped you achieve value. This is why, once again, we were talking about it at the beginning when people were filing in, why it's so important to ensure the customer lifecycle is executed well. So why do you think that some people argue, and Erika, you even mentioned it in our prep call on Monday, I think you said for the last 18 months, 2 years, you keep hearing this kind of this chatter on people arguing that CS shouldn't focus on revenue growth.
Yes, I think what I've been hearing a lot from the community and even on podcasts that I listen to is people, and by people I mean CS leaders, are afraid of losing that relationship with their customers. They are afraid of their CS teams converting into a sales 2.0 type of organization where they're pushing sales left and right into the customer without really validating the customer needs, right? Which could definitely break that relationship and that trust, right? Customers don't want to be sold all the time. They want to see value in your solution. So if you are not following a correct strategy on your team, you risk doing it wrong, which means that you can damage that relationship. And I think that's the biggest fear for CS teams right now.
Yeah, but if you don't follow the correct strategy for delivering success with your customers, you will fail. I mean,
Exactly.
I was nervous when I got behind the wheel for the first time, right? But I figured out how to drive, right? And now I can't live without it, right? So, I mean, being afraid of something, and I agree with you, you can't be selling 100% of the time. But Marta, doesn't having kind of those demonstrated wins and that value generated by that you've generated, doesn't that help you move to that point where you can have that conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. I always try to use this analogy when I'm facing mindset challenges in this conversation. We like to think that CS is really complicated, but it's really simple. So I like to strip it down into just saying, if you want to have a birthday party, you're going to go to the supermarket and you're going to say, hey, I want to have a birthday party. What do I need to make a cake? And someone's going to go, okay, you're going to need eggs, you're going to need flour, you're going to need sugar, you're going to need this. That person then you're not going to go, okay, but that's all free, right? Like, don't talk to me about price. Don't talk to me about money. Don't talk to me about anything else. The expectation for you to get that value is going to be that you have to pay, you have to invest in some way, shape, or form. And so I think it's really important to consider the fact that value and money go hand in hand. You can't uncouple those conversations, and being afraid of talking about money then means that you're going to be afraid of talking about value in some way, shape, or form. And so if you can answer to value,
well,
that money piece is going to come in anyway.
Yeah. And does that cake have Erika's name on it?
Exactly. Yeah.
Well,
What about you, Dan? What do you think on this?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing there, and we talked about this a little bit in the pre-call, is I think there's also like a misunderstanding of what it means to be a trusted advisor. And that kind of misplaced understanding puts selling and being a trusted advisor as like opposites that are going to butt heads, and that you can't build a relationship and trust if you have this underlying motive to add revenue from an existing customer. And to Marta's point, like that couldn't be further from the truth. That's a core part of being a trusted advisor. If I know you've got a pain point, I know that you're struggling because you really want to achieve a certain goal, and I know that purchasing either this add-on or using this service or something will help you get there, and I'm afraid to mention that, I'm doing the opposite of being a trusted advisor. I'm actually withholding value from you. And to Marta's point about being afraid to talk about money means being afraid to talk about value. And so I think that there needs to be like a reframe in what we think being a trusted advisor means, because if we make it only this kind of nice relationship thing, no wonder sales and revenue generating activities can feel like they're opposite that when they're not.
So that dovetails nicely into my next question about kind of balancing that those revenue driven activities with kind of that traditional relationship building activity, and then maintaining that trusted advisor status. So what kind of, I mean, I already heard mindset is super important. 100%. What other ideas, thoughts, strategies do you have to share with folks on that?
I can take a go at this one. Honestly, I don't really think there's a big difference between your normal role and your revenue focused driven role, right? To be focused on revenue, you need to do CS the right way, which we already discussed. And what that means is opening your ears to really listen to what the customer is saying, asking the right questions at the right time, deep diving and really understanding deeply what the needs are. And when you're doing that and knowing, of course, that you need to really know your product, right? You can pinpoint the challenges that the customer is facing to a solution that can fix those challenges, or that can break them free from those barriers. And you're doing that naturally, right? Because you want them to succeed. So at the end of the day, it's just doing your own role. But the key is, does this help me make more money or not? And that's when the revenue-driven mindset comes into place.
Well, so you're selling. Okay,
yeah.
You are selling them, right? You are selling them on an idea. You are selling them on a new piece of functionality, because you believe, given what you know about the customer, that they will get value out of it. Guess what? You're selling, right?
Yeah.
You're selling. So why not have that as a motivating factor in your comp plan? Why not be awarded for that? And yet but you have to have, for example, a compensation model, because compensation, incentives drive behavior. You have to have a compensation model that is different than a sales compensation model.
Definitely. Yeah, you're not being targeted with a quota per se, but you're still responsible for identifying those opportunities and making them way into converting into closed deals, right? So, I can talk from experience at Aptura. Before 2 years ago, we didn't have an expansion target. We didn't have an upsell target. We were just measured on GRR. We had a target of 89%. You do that, you get your bonus and things like that, right? After last year, we implemented a new compensation model where we now measure CSMs also on upsell targets and NRR, right? What that allowed CSMs to do is really value the amount of effort that they're already bringing into the table, and also get compensated for it, because to be honest, from my perspective, I feel like all of the legwork is being done by the CSM, and who's actually getting the commissions is the sales team, right? Why would that be fair? So these new models kind of help CSMs to fight for that money, right? So I just love the new revenue compensation model.
Well, and it's not fair. It's not fair given the subscription economy, and not to take anything away from salespeople. I have a tremendous amount of respect for salespeople. I've got a lot of friends that are salespeople, but things have changed, right? And it's while it's important to get them in the door, it's even more important to keep them around, right? Our businesses are survive, if not thrive, on customer lifetime value. Right. And the only team that really is truly responsible for driving CLTV are the post-sales teams.
Mm-hmm.
It's also, you mentioned the subscription economy. The cost of acquiring a single customer has gone up dramatically. Sales cycles are getting a lot longer as well. It's becoming harder to sell into a prospect. And the reality is that companies already have a large list of customers who who have already purchased. The barrier to entry is not there anymore. And these are customers who are going to, you can very easily measure, are they seeing value out of their investment already? Where are they along our maturity model or along our maturity path? And what additional use cases, what additional business challenges can they be solving for with our problem? Now, the cost of acquiring that customer, well, it doesn't exist because they've already been acquired, but the cost of growing that customer is so much less. And yet the return on investment in any of the activities of expanding that customer is so much greater than that of acquiring a brand new customer.
For me, it has a direct impact on a company's EBITDA, right? Which is, by the way, that's, you asked me what the differences were with the increasing upsells and expansions course when we were getting started. Actually, I talk about how, this type of strategy positively impacts the bottom line of a company, right? So these companies should be lining up to, enable their success teams to be driving expansion revenue. Dan, what have you got for this?
Yeah, I think very much in agreement with what Erika and Marta have said. And I think that, as far as when you talked about how you balance the relationship aspect, I think a core part of that is keeping as front and center in the relationship is you're always trying to constantly uncover what new challenges that they have so that you can continue to build that relationship and bring value to them, whether that's through existing service offerings that they already have, which just continues to build the value case, or through revenue generating ones that are, whether that's, upsell, cross sell, fill in the blank. And so I think that, keeping a core part of your relationship building being around uncovering what new challenges they're facing, because that sort of discovery with your customers in that relationship isn't a one-time deal that you do at the beginning of the relationship, because their challenges evolve, their company evolves, your product evolves over time. All those things lead to, you want to make sure that that's a core part of that. And if you're constantly solving challenges for them, whether there's an added cost or not, that does nothing but deepen the relationship rather than make it something that's in, again, contention with adding value.
Yes, 100%.
Love that.
Right? The more value you drive, the easier it is to sell them on new ideas, right? The easier the easier it is to drive those expansions or even just that renewal. Because if you're helping them achieve value, there's no reason why they're going to leave, because it's a pain in the ass to leave, right? They're getting value and their team is on board. My God, why would they leave? There is a cost, and while we talk about, especially in the subscription economy, a low cost, a low barrier to entry and a relatively low barrier to exit, there's still a barrier. Just a reminder, folks, questions, please post your questions in the Q&A window or upvote questions that are there. We'll start getting to questions here in about 10 minutes or less. So we talk about, we've talked about how all the goodness that this brings, but what are some of the potential risks of a heavily revenue focused CS approach, and how can we mitigate those?
I think one of the risks I think can be there is, and it ties to what you comp on and what you measure on from a KPI perspective, because people will naturally, just it's human nature, perform to what they're measured on and comped on. So I think that there can be a risk to, because the fact that there is a revenue generating component to CS that's vitally important, but it's not the only thing that they do and not the only component that matters. There can be an accidental kind of overcorrection where you start to drop some of the not directly one-to-one tied to revenue activities. And that's not a reason to not do it, but that's a risk to be aware of. Similarly, if you do have a sales team that's involved and the CS team suddenly gets very incentivized around this, it can cause confusion for a customer on who do they talk to about what. Like, those are really tactical, but I've seen those things firsthand when that mistake happens, when a CS team suddenly gets empowered to do that and enabled to do that. And then there's confusion for a customer on who they talk to about that. And I think that, not being done well, if there's not enablement to go with it, the risk would be you empower and create an environment where CSMs become poor sellers. And that's the experience that we don't want customers to have. It's not that we don't want more people selling to them, it's that we don't want people doing sales poorly. So those are some of the risks if you don't kind of build a moat around those and shore that up a little bit.
So coaching and training.
those are some of the big ones.
Yeah.
That and aligned and broad cross-organizational alignment. A CS team can't decide in a vacuum that they're going to create an upsell motion if there's an existing sales function and then expect there to be no friction internally or externally.
What about a lack of kind of management and guidance from leadership, Erika or Marta? You know, and sometimes customer success teams don't have a number, although I would say that they probably do if they have like GRR targets, right? You do have a number or NRR targets or what have you for their book of business. But this isn't the type of thing where you could just say, okay, set it and forget it, right? The management needs to be involved.
Yes, definitely. One of the things that I've found to be very successful here at the company that I work for is CS leadership involvement during the rollout of the new program, rollout of the new compensation model, the changes that are going to be taken into effect during the year, a lot of enablement and training, like CSMs can't just switch the way that they're working and not receive proper training, because then things might go wrong, right? And that's where that strategy might not be successful. So definitely important.
Marta, anything to add?
The only thing I would add or supplement to what Dan and Erika have both said is that when you are rolling out this change, that is now a change management cycle where people are going to be operating very differently to how they've operated previously. So what Dan has said, absolutely that needs to be cross functional alignment within the organization, or that rollout is going to fail. And it's not failed because it was a bad idea for CSMs to own expansion. It failed because it structurally was not properly set up and the change management wasn't done properly. Erika's also completely correct in the saying that executive sponsorship of this program is really important, and continuous enablement as well. I think one of the key areas too that's really important in driving change management of something like this is early and frequent communication. You can't just wake up on Monday morning and say, great, we're going to do this, and have your CSMs able to just get up and running. That change needs to be communicated 3 months before, 6 months before, and that communication can't just be, hey, we're going to start selling now. It needs to start with, what's the problem statement? What's the problem statement for customers? Because as CSMs, we really see the lens from the customer's point of view. What's the problem statement from customers? What's the problem statement from the company? What are we going to do about this? Why is this the path forward? And communicate that continuously before the change even happens so that people are bought in. Have CSMs, have other leaders a part of building what that's going to look like from the time that you communicate it, so that they're building the change that they want to see and are naturally bought in as a result. So it's a change management cycle, and it's a big change that needs to be managed properly.
Yeah, very much. It's not a set it and forget it type of thing. Okay, one last question I have before we get to questions from the audience. Which I think it's important. We've alluded to it, but how can CSMs leverage their unique customer insights to identify new revenue opportunities? What is the tactically, how do they do this?
I can jump in here. As I mentioned at the start, my previous organization, we took over expansion. We always did renewals, but we took over expansion. It led to 70% year-over-year growth. The things that we were looking at in that case, a lot of that growth came from upsell of a specific module. It was a reporting module. And so we had access to our customers' data previously in how often they were using things, how often they were downloading reports from the system itself. And we supplemented that with conversations with them and doing a deep dive into what the reporting looked like. And that gave us a really specific hit list of who to go after and start selling the reporting engine that we were talking to them about. So that's just a very specific and tactical example. But the first thing we need to look at is understand within your customer life cycle, what are the different areas that customers should be successful in when they first roll out? What are those initial value drivers? Have they met them? Yes or not? Because if they haven't, do not talk to them about something else unless they haven't met them because that wasn't the right thing. But have they met them? And if they have, what else can they be solving for in this moment? And what are they using within the product that are leading indicators that they have or additional use cases or additional problems that aren't being solved with it, with whatever core functionality they've purchased today, and using those data points initially.
Yeah, compiling that experience they had in those data points and creating a narrative that's going to be very relatable to them.
Yeah,
I mean, it's incredible that those unique customer insights that you all bring to the table and the knowledge you have about their business and the relationships that you have can be incredibly important when you're positioning a new solution for them that you feel is going to generate value. Like we said before, you are operating at a point of strength because you can point back to the value that you've already helped them generate. This isn't a hard sell. It's like, hey, listen, we did this before for you when you said you had this problem. Now I see that you might be going down this path. Here's some additional value that you can get from us.
Yeah, you can also use information from other customers to benchmark, right? Like, hey, this customer did this thing, is using this feature this way, and got this value out of it, right? You've mentioned that you've struggled with this, which is very similar to what I've seen with other customers. By implementing this other feature, then you can see the value, right? So, and I couldn't agree more with Marta. I think data is critical for you to be able to deliver that value and to identify these opportunities and to increase the revenue from your portfolio, right? So you have to be keeping a good eye on what's happening, the behavior, the features, and everything that you have at hand, because that can pretty easily identify opportunities like the one Marta just described. So yeah, I love data, by the way.
Data is everybody's friend. So tell me something, Dan. Can we, though, separate, and I get this question all the time, can we separate the selling of this solution from the actual negotiating of the terms? And should we be doing that? Right? Because that's where tends to be the biggest risk when it comes to maintaining the trusted advisor relationship.
Love that. And I think that I'm going to give two answers to the two questions. The can we? Yes. Should we? It depends. I mean, candidly, right? If it depends on a number of components. If it's transactional at that phase where this is what the pricing is, period, and there's not a whole lot of negotiation, why would you separate that out? Why would you bring somebody else into that component to have those particular conversations? The idea of, but
also the relationship, you have is super important as well.
100%. And I think that have you enabled CSMs to have those conversations? It's one thing to be able to point to value and identify value add solutions that have a cost, but the whole realm, like there's a reason the field of sales exists. And like you said, speaking of earlier about having respect for them, all of the skills that go into negotiation and pricing and all of that, and specifically closing, is an actual specific skill set in and of itself that the best sales professionals spend their entire career nailing and growing in. And so to suddenly expect CSMs to be able to do that isn't necessarily the right call. And I think that that's where you can come in, and I've seen that done well. And we can talk all day about the specific different models, because I don't think there's one right answer to it, because it depends a lot on the who you have filling certain seats and things like that, and their skill set and what they bring to the table. But I've seen it work very well where CS is responsible for generating the CS qualified lead and really responsible for bringing that, maybe 80% of the way. And then when it comes to the actual negotiation component, an account manager or a sales negotiation person comes in who handles all of the numbers and all of that, both to protect the relationship side of things, so that when the CSM is recommending something, they're still seen truly as that trusted advisor, value driving in the relationship. But also you're bringing in somebody who knows all the different levers they have to pull. They can talk different contract terms. They can talk payment terms and what those different levers are that can come into pricing that a CSM might just not be enabled to speak to. So I think both for success of the actual sale as well as for the relationship that the CSM has with the customer, it is often beneficial to bring in a different representative to actually have that final component of the conversation.
We even include some negotiation techniques in some of our training, but it's with the caveat that, you know, you should know this stuff, but you should also, you know, be working with the salesperson, right? Work with your salesperson, help close the deal, but be part of that, right? You need to be part of that process, just behind the scenes. Right.
That's exactly it. You shouldn't feel like you have no idea what the customer is talking about when they ask you a question, when you're bringing this up, right? Yeah. Even if you're going to defer to your sales representative who's going to come in and maybe have the negotiation and answer the question or whatever, you don't want to be like a deer in the headlights. You want to be able to be literate about these topics and terms to be able to speak the language of your customer, even if you're not the one who's going to be doing that.
Right. And prepare yourself as well as your sales, person with, for example, you know, the potential things that the customer's not going to like, not going to want, right? Right, exactly. Be prepared for that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Everything awesome. Dan just said.
Yeah. Let's.
Nothing to add.
To add to that, I think it doesn't always have to be the salesperson either. As a CS leader, I have stepped in to do the negotiation of a number of expansion deals multiple times because it does protect that relationship. So I completely agree. Can you? Yes. Should you? Not always. And there are multiple different team members as part of an account team who can play those different roles in different cases.
Yeah, exactly. So Erika, I know you're a strategic customer success manager, but with Marta and Dan, you both have you have team members as well that report up to you. Do each of you own a number? Do you own a number, even if your team doesn't necessarily own a number? But do you own a number?
I do. I do.
You own a number. Erika, do you know the numbers as an individual contributor? Yes. Marta, do you own a number as a leader, even if your team doesn't own specific numbers?
I own Dan, a retention number.
You own a retention number. Okay. And what about you, Dan?
Retention and expansion number.
Okay.
Both as well.
And it's important. It's important to own a number.
I like it.
Yeah. Same. Well, the bigger the number you own, the more leverage actually you have in your organization. Even before the subscription economy, I owned one of the biggest numbers in my organization in North America, and it gave me, it just isn't I was a leader and I had people working for me, but it gave me a lot of leverage. Mm-hmm. It allowed me to ask for a lot of things, to do a lot of different things. I mean, it's incredible when you can sit there and say, hey, I've got the biggest patch in the entire in North America. I want to do X. And they're like, okay, let's keep this guy happy. All right, let's answer some questions. To my guests, if you see a question on here, I see Dan, you already jumped in. If you see a question on here that you want to answer live, hit that answer live button and I'll call on you. Our first question comes from Lee. Lee tells us that a couple of years ago they made an intentional decision to not have CS carry a quota. In particular, at what we call the premier level, our largest, most strategic customers. We focus on retention NPS, and we wanted to avoid two dynamics: the perception from customers that we care more about selling things than driving world-class service, and number two, having CS lose focus on customer sat and retention and just spend time chasing the money. I'd love to hear the panel's thoughts on this approach. And it looks like, Dan, you wanted to jump in on this one first.
Absolutely. On that component, Lee, I think that the concern that you have with the things you want to build a moat against are super valid. When we talked earlier about the risks in this conversation that there are to making this jump, those were both things that we put as risks. You heard it from kind of all three of us that are speaking on the panel here. So first off, I really want to validate the concern that you had, and I appreciate that approach. So I want to start with that. Secondly, from there, though, I would say that there are more levers that you can pull than just owning a quota directly that I think can enable you to incentivize your CS team to take revenue driving activities. Everything from spiffs and spot bonuses, even if it's not their core KPI. And so that way it drives the behavior of you're rewarded for this, but your core responsibility is this, right? That's where the KPIs versus spiff can come into play.
Love that.
You can use CS qualified leads, which would then kind of take it even there may be one step removed from the quota and carrying and maybe even closing, because they get a qualified lead that makes it the qualified, that can count depending on how you do it. So there's multiple levers that you can pull beyond the quota component. And the idea is you want to create an environment where they know that they are incentivized to do revenue driving activities. What that exactly means can look different. And I really just want to validate what you said about the concern about guarding those two things, because that's crucially important. But you want to also incentivize those behaviors that are going to most closely tie to what the company cares about at the end of the day.
For example, you don't have a customer success person should not have a heavily leveraged model. It should not be 50%, base plus
Absolutely.
50% upside, right? That is not right, because it should be more like an 80-20. And in that 80%, it's customer sat and driving renewals and yada, 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 right? And then there's a variable component that's, hey, here's a little extra. Here's a little extra if you do a little extra, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And so you're aligning the incentives to the outcomes you want to drive. But similarly, with the balance of those incentives, you're also implicitly communicating something else to them as well.
Yeah, love that.
Marta, you got anything to add? As from a leader perspective? And I'm going to ask you, Erika.
Nothing other than Dan is completely right. And at Gatekeeper, that is how the CSMs own expansion. So we started with CSQLs or CS qualified leads about a year ago. And about, where are we? April, 4 months ago. So at the start of January, we started taking on PS selling. So it's a matter of being more closely tied to revenue without necessarily doing all the selling and working up towards that. And measuring also the customer response to those programs that you're putting in.
Love that. And then Erika, as in your role, what kind of keeps you balanced?
Yeah, so for me, it's precisely exactly what Dan said about not having like a quota per se, but the fact that 20% of, I am paid with a salary base, of course, which is a big part of what I make, right? And I have a 20% or 15% bonus, which is dependent on retention and expansion, right? Plus, the CS skills also give us a percentage of the amount of money that we bring from those opportunities that we identify, right? So and going back to what I said earlier, like you can't get upsells and expansions done if you're not doing your CS work, right? And that's what you're being rewarded with your salary base, right? So for me, I'm a very revenue-driven professional, and this doesn't break me. This doesn't break the relationships that I have with my customers, because I know that I am not selling something when it's not the right time to do it. So I don't know. I just think it's the way that you compensate is what is going to drive the behavior.
Yeah. Awesome. PS selling, Kat, I believe what Marta is referring to is professional services, so consulting.
Correct.
Yeah. Awesome. Lee, thank you for the question. And Dan, thank you for hitting done without me having to ask you. Our next question comes from Sonia. Nobody's volunteered yet for this, so let me hit this. Sonia asks, most of my current team came from relationship/account management as problem solvers and project managers. How do those of us who never had to sell before sell effectively? Anybody?
I can answer that because, as I said previously, we didn't used to sell. So I think the most important element is to start slow. First of all, if you come in as a problem solver or a project manager, you are already really well suited. You just might not realize it, but you're really well suited to sell, because selling is just solving for problems. And so I actually think that approach puts you, or that situation puts you in a better position than someone who's come in from like a hard selling background, to sell to existing customers. Might not do super well when it comes to like net new or brand new business and prospects. But when it comes to existing customers, all you really need to focus on is solving for their problems and aligning that to what else they can do and where we need to do. Understood, you have an aggressive sales team. Some of you are a little intimidated. Some of the things I've done with my team to help get them a little bit more comfortable with talking about money, as I said at the start, and I will die on this hill, value and money cannot be uncoupled from each other. The two are one and the same. If you're talking about value, you need to talk about money, and vice versa. So doing role play with your team, and acting as a client, acting as a great client, acting as a difficult client, acting as the CSM, and have them be the customer, so you can see what their fears are about what the customer is going to say if you are trying to go for a sale or anything like that. Those are some of the things that you can do. Or you can start with just focusing first on the CSQLs and identifying those opportunities, but make sure that you're part of the conversation when it does come to closing and negotiation and everything else, so that you can learn and pair with the AE on how to take it to the next step.
Don't underestimate the power you have of solving their previous problems in selling them new ideas. Okay? You have a tremendous amount of leverage when you can say, hey, we solved this problem for you when you came to us to begin with. I have this other idea, and here's how I think you could use this to extract additional value out of our platform. And yeah, there's additional cost, but look at this. I've spun this narrative for you. You are selling. Guess what? You're selling, Sonia. You are selling when you say, hey, I have this new idea how you can extract additional value from our solution. Hey, you are selling. You may not end up closing the deal. You may not end up finalizing the terms and conditions, but you 100% are selling. Dan, Erika, you got anything to add?
I think one of the things I would add, in addition to, I love the really tactical of something like role plays. I've done that plenty of time with my team because I think it helps deflate some of the tension around it. There's no safer place to fail than in there. You know what I mean? So I think that's just from a tactical perspective, really great. I think the only other thing I would add to that is lean on your existing sales team. Like, hopefully you've got a good relationship with them. Bring some of them in to help with some of the enablement. If you've got budget for training, there's great enablement out there for this kind of thing. I know that there's plenty of resources on this topic, but even if you don't, like, lean on your sales team. They're usually happy to help with some of this, because this is usually something that still involves making their job easier at the end of the day as well. So lean on the resources you already have is just something I've seen be really effective as well.
Actually, sitting in on sales pitches, just being that kind of silent fly on the wall is incredibly powerful. Hell, it's how I built my product acumen at every company that I went to work for in my career. I would insist on going out on sales calls, sitting on calls, just listening.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks, Sonia. Thank you for your question. Great question. Our next question comes from Lewis. Lewis, looks like Dan wants to jump in on this first. Lewis asks, how does CS typically fit into a model where customers are assigned sales account managers?
Great question. And again, this will be one of the famous answers of CS of it depends a little bit on what your model is. So I'm going to more give an underlying principle than an exact model, because I think it varies so much from one org to the next and how that's set up. Because candidly, you usually don't have the ability as a CS leader to just wave your wand and say, this is what we're going to do for our CS-AM relationship. Number one, over communicate how you both are partnering together. There has to be clear alignment and expectations around that. Number two, ensure alignment around the journey that you're putting customers on. If you've got multiple people that are coming to them saying, I'm your strategic contact who you should work with to grow and achieve value, that's going to be very confusing to them. Who do I go to for what? If they're getting different sets of emails and outreaches from different people that are not coordinated with each other, it's going to feel like spam to them, and they're going to, again, just experience confusion. So lots of alignment, lots of work there. But then from a really just a tactical perspective, what have I seen that typically look like? A lot of what we described earlier, whether that's the CSM maybe uncovering new leads, CS qualified leads through their conversations with the customer and existing users, the AM then focusing on a bit more of either a closer role of handling the actual negotiations and closing the sale, but also maybe proactively cultivating with different teams at the org that just aren't users at all. So you as a CSM are maybe focused on adding value with the existing users and existing champions. And so an account manager is maybe cultivating relationships with those who aren't users yet to be able to tie into the value that you've already achieved. And so this is going to be a really close partnership that you need to work on together. So over communicate, align the journey, and then typically closing and non-active users.
Yeah, and I think Raul, your question, piling on Lewis's question, I think Dan just addressed that as well. It is a close collaboration, is a close partnership. The best thing that you could do, if you need to, you establish swim lanes. But the best thing that you could do is communicate, over communicate. Right. At the end of the day, this isn't a competition. Right. We're trying to help the customer achieve value and ultimately bring that into the company, right, and help our organization. So you just need to work together. Oh, awesome. Erika, Marta, do you either of you have anything to add to that?
No, I think Dan covered it pretty well. Collaboration is key. So you don't have to be having frictions with a sales team. You need them as your best friends.
Awesome. Just a reminder, it's the top of the hour. We're going to keep going here for another 15 minutes. We'll keep answering questions. So if you can stick around, stick around. Let's see. Our next question comes from Liz. Liz says, I'm in software SaaS and CS faces the challenge of expanding upselling customers into other divisions due to budgets out of their control. Any suggestions on how to tackle that?
The budgets out of their control, that's from the customers, right?
I'm in software and says, Liz, are you still on? Can you clarify?
Yeah, she said.
Yeah, she said correct.
Okay, good. That's what she said. Awesome.
How to tackle budget constraints. I guess, look, budget constraints have been impacting CS teams, not only with expansion, but also with churn, right? So the best advice that I can give is back again to value delivery. If you can demonstrate that you're delivering value and how you're solving a big problem, and talk about ROI, which is return on their investment. They are paying for a solution that you're helping them save costs or improve revenue or whatever metric that's tied to money, then you can position yourself or have at least a better chance of saying, hey, this is why you need us, right? So value delivery all the way.
Quantifiable, specific, quantifiable value. Here's the return on your investment. And you know what? If you can tie that into some overarching corporate objective they have, even better. Hey, I understand by reading and this is, back in the day, we used to read annual reports and 10Ks all the time. I understand based off of reading your annual report, one of your challenges this year is X. Well, guess what? This thing that we're doing with you is going to have a direct impact on X, and here's how. And we believe that you're going to see a X% increase or decrease or additional Y or Z, and that is going to have, being able to have that narrative. You got to do your homework. You can't walk into these things and just wing it. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Marta, you got anything to add?
Nothing in relation to what you just said, because I completely agree. People are willing to pay for what they value the most. So if you can prove that they value this, then absolutely. tactically, there are some things you can also look at, given Kat said that there are other areas of the client's company that would benefit from us, but the budget isn't there. If the conversation is just like a complete no, there are tactically other things you can look at as well, to help and get somewhat creative in the negotiation. Some of the things that we use at times is maybe if you can commit to an early renewal that is like a multi-year renewal, you can then provide better pricing. It might not be completely for free for everyone else, but at a reduced cost. That's equally beneficial to the customer and to your organization. Other things that you might want to look at is advocacy. Can they introduce you to 5 other people? Can they provide referrals? What about a case study, a video case study? Can they speak at a conference? Things like this are creative ways that you can get around budget constraints. However, with that said, the value conversation is the most important one. This is just sort of a sprinkling on top if you're really stuck between a rock and a hard place and need to get creative.
Awesome. Thanks, Marta. Dan, anything to add?
Just that I completely agree with Erika and Marta. They hit it out
Awesome.
of the park.
Awesome. Thank you, Liz. Thanks for sticking around. Great question. Our next, let me okay. So our next question comes from Brenna. Brenna asks, I am interested in hearing, thanks for the question, Brenna. I'm interested in hearing everyone's thoughts on how long the sales individual should be part of the upsell discussion after the deal is closed and transitioned to the CSM to get some of that upsell credit. 6 months, a year, more than a year? Anybody got an opinion on that one?
How long the sales individual should be part of the upsell?
After
I
the
have a
deal?
controversial
talking-
opinion.
Okay, Marta, what's your controversial opinion?
My controversial opinion is I assume this here is, hey, the deal has just closed. Now it's off to the implementation team and the CS team, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
My perspective is I think that we need to sort of take a step back and let those teams start to build trust with the customer, and not be super involved as soon as the sale closes. And the reason being, I've seen when salespeople stick around for a really long time, they continue to sort of be the conduit of like the implementation and CS, et cetera. That takes up all of the space in the relationship and makes it really challenging for then the implementation consultant or onboarding specialist and CSM to build that relationship with them. And so I personally think that sales should take a step back because long-term, it's the CSM who's going to really drive that. And the IC needs to help build quick wins. And in order to do that, IC being implementation consultant, sorry. In order to do that, they need to build a relationship really quickly with the customer.
Yeah, 100%. And if,
Agreed.
by the way, you have an implementation component, customer success, though, still should be introduced as soon as the deal is done.
Absolutely.
Even if you've got like a long implementation,
Yep.
CS needs to be plugged in, right? Because there's time there that CS individual could be building knowledge, relationship, understanding, and that's wasted if they're not plugged in right away.
They should be helping them prepare for the next phase, which is adoption. And that
Yes.
shouldn't happen once they're done implementation. That should happen when they are in implementation.
Yes. Dan, Erika, anything to add to Marta's supposedly controversial statement? I think it was freaking spot on.
I don't know that a lot of salespeople would love hearing me say it. That's what I mean by controversial.
But salespeople are not, they are paid to go hunt.
Yeah, so
Right.
I haven't seen that. I don't think it's controversial because I haven't seen a salesperson who stays after the sale longer. Like most of them are like, okay, yes, I'm done, moving on to the next thing, right? Not every time. And I mean, I have very few instances where they keep being part of that journey, and they continue to be there, but only like for bigger, like
I worked for a company where we had a consumption model, and what we did is we made it very clear. We said, okay, within this band of penetration, right? We may have sold them 100 seats, and we know there's 1,000 seats possible. So within the first 30% sales is there, and they are involved. And then between 30 and 60% or 30 and 70%, it's a collaboration between sales and customer success, and they make a decision on, and hopefully by that time, the relationship has transitioned effectively to customer success. Customer success then begins working on those expansions, and then above 70%, it's all customer success. And that was a nice model. It was very, very clear. It was data driven. There wasn't a whole lot of ambiguity. Awesome. Brenna, thank you. Great question. Our next question comes from Lee. Lee asks, would really be interested in hearing how that happens at the leadership level. What is happening on the sales side that supports a harmonious transition? And Dan, you volunteered to jump in on this, so go for it, man.
Yeah, I think that this is where, even as a leader, you bring some of the CSM effective change management that you would have done with a customer, you bring that internal. You show the sales reps and the sales leaders, like, what's in it for them, why this matters, why this will help them achieve more, stronger outcomes. You speak just like you would with a customer internally. You bring to the table persuasion in a way that speaks language that they care about. So if you're showing how what you're doing will actually enable their reps to focus their energy in a better place that leads to higher close rates, a higher proportion of ARR1 from existing accounts with less meetings spent with accounts, they're not going to be upset about that. This is not something that a sales leadership would be opposed to necessarily. So you need to be able to do that and show the value that you will be able to bring to them, and come collaboratively, and why this is a value for your customers, for your CSMs, for your sales teams, and how any changes you're going to make there benefit the whole organization. But then candidly, you have to be able to execute. You have to be able to follow through. If you say, we're going to do this, and then your CSMs aren't doing a good job at uncovering new leads at organizations and uncovering expansion opportunities, you'll get a sales team that then feels like they're being hamstrung and will come in and try to take back over, right? So you have really clear communication followed by excellent execution to be able to back up what you're saying to get their buy-in on that. So yeah, there's no shortcut to it. There's not here's the quick conversation you have, because this is like, I always joke that there's the work that's busy work that we all pull our hair out at and we wish we didn't have to do. But then there's the work that is the work. And this is the work that falls in that category, in my opinion. As a leader, your job is to be able to influence without authority these other leaders and help drive change at that level.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, in a growing company, the customer success leader typically has a even bigger number than sales. I remember talking to Maria Martinez, who at the time was in her final year as global customer success leader at Salesforce, and her number was $2 billion, and the sales leader's number was $1 billion. Okay, so in a growing company, that's a lot of pressure to put on to put on somebody in a customer success leadership role. And so from my experience, sales is like, okay, that's good. You take that $2 billion number, right? You take that sustaining revenue number. I'm fine with my $1 billion. Yeah, that gets crazy how these numbers are out of whack. But once again, Maria was in a much better position, given that she had an existing customer base, like you said, Dan, an existing customer base to sell into, with actual proof that they were able to deliver value. So while it's a bigger number, it's her team is in a better position, and it's a completely different mindset.
Love that.
Agreed.
Great question, Lee.
All right. Yes. Thank you, Lee, for the question. Our next question probably could be our final question, comes from Paulette. Paulette asks, what about expansions to another group or business unit within an existing customer account? Who should own or drive that? The CSM, AE, or CSM plus AE? And it looks like, Erika, you wanted to jump in on this.
Yes. So it doesn't really matter who you're selling to. Your job as a CSM is to identify those key stakeholders that will be able to make a decision. So if it's a different group or a different stakeholder that's not part of your main point of contact, you can also chase that opportunity, right? Like if you find, I don't know, someone who you can talk to and speak to a challenge that they might be facing, you can definitely get a go at it. But one other thing that I would also say is that you don't have to do this alone. That's why we also have an account manager or a sales rep or anyone who you can work with to build that strategy to pursue those opportunities, right? So it's not that you have to do it on your own. I'm just saying, like, you can partner with a sales team and make that happen. But I wouldn't take my eyes off of those opportunities, because those are also big opportunities for you to make more revenue. So
awesome. Dan, Marta, anything to add?
I think for me, I think it comes down to natural skill set. I have always been of the opinion, and that doesn't mean it's immutable, but opening new doors and opening new business units within an existing account, naturally that is a little bit better suited to an AE from a skill set perspective. It's very similar to prospecting, because you don't necessarily know that the business unit cares about the same things as the customer. Now, they're going to need the proof points of this existing unit has already seen success. And so I think the best approach is CSM and AE in conjunction. The AE does the actual prospecting, finding those stakeholders, understanding, is there a relationship with our existing business unit? What does that look like? All the LinkedIn Navigator stuff. That is a gross oversimplification of what sales does. But doing all of that, and the CSM working with the AE to say, here's what I'm getting from our existing contacts. Here's how they've been seeing success. Here's what you can feed into these new business units. Here's what I understand about the business. So I think it's a divide and conquer between the CSM and AE approach.
I love that. Divide and conquer. Yeah.
Completely agree. And I think CS can help point AEs in the right direction if they, based on what they hear from the existing business units that they do work with, they can help kind of point in that. But I couldn't agree more with what Marta said. It is something that will look a little different from each org to each org, but will almost always look at like some kind of combo between the two. So love that.
Awesome. All right. Well, we've come to the end of our time together today, and I wanted to say how awesome our conversation has been. But hey, what matters most is what all of you think. So I kindly ask you to share your valuable feedback on LinkedIn, tagging me, our guests, and or Success Coaching or Success Hacker. A big thank you to our amazing panelists, and happy birthday again, Erika, for generously sharing their ideas, thoughts, insights, and best practices. Let me leave you with this thought. Exceptional customer success managers understand that they don't have all the answers, but they sure know where to find them. That's why we've created CSM Mastermind. I think we're now in our 5th year doing this, to tap into the collective knowledge and experience of our community to support everyone's growth. Remember to sign up and mark your calendars for our next event on May 22nd, when we're going to talk about improving the customer onboarding experience. Until then, make sure to make space for yourself and your mindset every single day, and have a great rest of your week and month, everybody. See you soon.